Our first keynote speaker of the day is up next, Coleen Rowley. Maybe a lot of you know her, and she is well known as a FBI whistleblower. She, right after 9/11, before 9/11, she had alerted the FBI to this Masawi who was learning how to land an airliner, and she thought maybe he should be investigated by the FBI and they should get into his computer. Well, they dropped the ball. That didn't happen. 9/11 happened, and she spoke before the U.S. Congress on that failure by the FBI, but she got demoted. That's what her reward for being up, trying to alert to an imminent danger. But she became a peace activist, and she also ran for the U.S. House of Representatives in this district. We used to be in CD2. She ran against John Klein, and I campaigned hard for her. I was part of the DFL here in Goodhue County, and we tried to get her elected. We failed, but at least Colleen won the vote in Red Wing. Yeah. And she's a great peace activist. She's been speaking all over the world, and she's spoken at Peacestock before. And she's so knowledgeable, and she has a memory that's amazing, with names and stuff. It's just mind-boggling, and we're glad that she chose to come back to Peacestock to speak. So please give a good welcome to Coleen Rowley.
All right, who's ready for the truth?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize because this is going to be the unvarnished truth. People might remember David Swanson's book, War is a Lie. And I have some long experience on this, unfortunately. Not only did I speak out, but I actually did lose some of my salary because I was a whistleblower about 9/11. 4 senators went to bat for me, including Wellstone, Dayton, Grassley, and Leahy. 4 senators wrote to FBI Director Mueller and to the Attorney General and said I shouldn't be fired. And that's what saved me. Now, your whistleblowers are fired in a New York second. So I was one of these, very early on, I was lucky. And actually, I made it to a few months after being a whistleblower on 9/11 to becoming a whistleblower on Iraq. So I wrote a memo on Iraq that said it was going to backfire. Okay, very few people. We all had war fever back then. So nobody was saying this is a stupid thing. And I got into the front page of the New York Times. One of the only people, they wrote my whole letter to Mueller in the front page of the New York Times. But guess what? That was not popular in the FBI. And that is why I had to step down from my legal counsel position. Okay, so then we go from that to running, and when I ran for Congress as a Democrat, by the way, I'm a little embarrassed now because the Democrats have turned into war hawks. But when I ran in 2007 and 8, 2005 and 6, the Iraq war was wearing thin in 2005, 2006, and I ran on the Iraq war against John Klein, who was a supporter of it. So then a couple years later, okay, so look behind you and look at my orange banner. End American Empire before it ends us. Okay? That is the answer to our question today. Does militarism provide the national security we seek? I mean, to be honest, it's almost so obvious, especially with this group. Not obvious to everybody else, But it's so obvious that you have to kind of think, what can I say about why militarism always backfires? It hasn't just backfired in the last 23 years, and even before that. It always backfires. It is always going to hurt us. And of course, the millions of people we kill as a result of these perpetual war system. So it's a terrible thing for the people that are the targets of our wars. But I'm going to try to explain as well why it's backfiring on us. Because if they know that it actually is hurting us, I think we could get back a little bit like the Vietnam War. At that time, people understood that there were American casualties. And they understood. They didn't probably care so much about the Vietnamese. Why? Because McNamara was telling the American people that we were helping the Vietnamese. But we just had to bomb their village to save it. Okay, so there was that lie was going on, and a lot of people, of course, certain people believed it. But as the costs of the war in Vietnam mounted, and we were paying taxes, of course, all prior wars, the United States has up to 90%. Can you imagine if Biden gave a speech and said, you know what, we are $33 trillion in debt, and we're going to go bankrupt, and we're trying to spend $100 and some billion for Ukraine and all of these military posts around the world. We have to raise taxes to 90%. What do you think would happen right now if that happened? What would happen if a bill came to each tax-paying household that said, you know what, we're just going to pay 1/100th of what the wars since 9/11 have cost, just 1/100th. And you know what, we're going to add $1,000 to your tax bill, average household. And that's just a small, tiny fraction, because we have to pay for the wars. What do you think would happen? It would end tomorrow. But because they've made a perpetual war system, it's a recipe for ongoing, because there's no cost to Americans. There's no draft. There's no higher taxes. They just print the money, by the way. That's why we're at 33 trillion. And the last one is, there's no casualties of Americans. We went to aerial bombing, no boots on the ground. If you want to be a mercenary and make a lot of money, maybe there's some Americans that way, but no American forces are publicly getting boots on the ground ever since Iraq and Afghanistan, where we had 70,000. That's nothing, by the way, compared to the rest of the world. So what are we doing? We're aerial bombing only, mostly aerial bombing, drone bombing, and then finally the use of proxies. So proxies, didn't start with Ukraine. Sacrificing the Ukrainians, and that didn't start with Ukraine. You can go all the way back to Bin Laden. Okay? How many people saw Charlie Wilson's War? Okay? Do you know that you missed the last chapter of that movie? The movie ends on a high note. They give an award to Charlie Wilson because he worked with the Mujahideen, and we tricked Russia into a war. Zbigniew Brzezinski was so proud of himself. He had a right that he was so proud he tricked Russia into this war. First the Soviet Union, by the way, before Russia. And he tricked them, we depleted their resources, and they went under. And they were so proud. But guess who we were arming and funding? Bin Laden. That was a proxy force way before the Ukrainians. And in the movie, actually, they made a final chapter of the Mujahideen, Bin Laden, Taliban, flying into the World Trade Center. because it all backfired. And, you know, we do this all the time because we work, and the United States has decided for perpetual war. We have a lot of our politicians crowing, absolutely crowing about the fact that we can get foreign proxies to fight and die for us. They fight and die over there, so we don't have to fight here. And we're very proud of the fact that we can incite regime changes all over the world by funding and arming these dissident groups. And we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you can go back probably before 9/11. All right, I guess it's time for me to look at my notes. So I forgot my notes and my husband sent me. Okay. So the sales pitches that give everybody war fever, there's different ones. And one of them was national security. We have to fight to maintain our national security. But most recently, and especially on the Democrat side, the sales pitch, and it began with Iraq, by the way. We had after weapons of mass destruction and the national security argument failed, then they went on to, we're going to bring democracy, human rights, peace and love to Iraq. That was the same thing as Afghanistan. We were going to bring women's rights. They did all the stories about women's rights. Human rights was weaponized. So everybody wants to feel good about their wars. And we want to feel good about it because we don't want to say we're just killing them to be an empire and American empire, to gain power and conquer the world and do regime changes so we have puppets in foreign governments who will do what we say. We don't want to say that. That's not, people don't like that. It hurts their feelings. So now we want to believe we're bringing peace and love to the world. Yeah, it's just like bomb the village to save it. Yeah, we have to kill millions of people to do it, but we will bring democracy. Biggest lie in the world. But that's the sales pitch. And I'm just going to go through a few of the lies, the individual lies. One is climate change. Okay, so these are all different ways that this is backfiring on us. Of course, it hurts the foreign people that are the targets. But one of the big things has been very hard. Someone in the audience told me this. It's been very hard. People, Vets for Peace will know this as well. It's been very hard to convince the climate activists, the climate change activists, to also join into anti-war causes. They didn't want to. No, we don't. That's unpopular to be anti-war. We want to stay popular on climate change. There's finally a little bit of inroads. That different groups are making some inroads with the climate. But the military is the biggest polluter in the world. These bombs and the use of fossil fuel for the tanks, even shipping the tanks over to Ukraine. I mean, the amount of, it's like the #1 use of fossil fuel is the U.S. military. So from the standpoint of climate, that's one of the big ways it's backfiring. Oh, I was going to say, recently there was a NATO report on climate change. And it was entitled, Why and How Climate Change Hurts NATO. Think about it. How climate change hurts NATO. What about how NATO hurts climate change? Or fuels climate change? It should be just completely reversed. Okay, and then of course environment. And along with climate change, environment. And now the United States has already got the cluster bombs over. We ran out of other ammunition. Hesitant so far, by the way, to use tactical nukes, although I think that'll happen. And I'm going to get to that later. But in the interim, Biden admitted we have to use cluster bombs because we're running out of ammunition. So imagine depleted uranium, and I know Sammy will talk about this more. I mean, this is the biggest pollution thing in the world. So environment, climate change, health. You know, the United States now ranks, I've heard anywhere from like 40th in the world, and I've heard 80th in the world, out of 170 some. Maybe somebody can, there's different sources for this, but as bad as 80th in the world climate change. Recently with COVID pandemic, I call it pandemia, but recently with the COVID pandemia, we had 16% of the casualties under COVID in the world when we only have 4% of the world's population. So what do you think is happening with health in the United States? Oh, and we've lost, Americans, never happened before. We now have lost 3 years of average lifespan. Not even due to COVID. In the first year of COVID, it was like 1 year, 1.5. We're now up to 3. We used to always, up until before the COVID thing, we had always increased our average lifespan. Usually by 1/10 of a year, but it was just going up slightly. And then it dropped like a lead balloon. We're now at a loss of 3 years of lifespan. That's incredible. The graph is incredible. And now it's not COVID anymore. It's called excess unexplained mortality. All the heart attacks and everything else. I like to talk about the mass shootings. Nobody connects mass shootings to the war. David Swanson did. He did a study. He looked at all of the mass shootings. A lot of them, a very high percentage, are military trained. So he did a study like that. But I think it's even more broad than that. When you're watching the mass shooting, we'll go home tonight, we'll turn on our television, and there will be at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 mass shootings throughout the United States. And in the really bad ones where, by the way, they don't even make the news anymore. Sometimes they're just at the end of the news, unless they're local. But in some of the really bad ones, the newscaster will always, just wait for it, every time. They'll say, police are investigating the motive. Police are investigating what was the motive. Okay, remember Agatha Christie and detective shows? Those were motives. That was a murder to try to kill somebody for the insurance money or something. Those were motives. It's not a motive if you get passed on the highway and you pull your gun out and shoot the guy who passed you. It's not a motive if you get mad, and by the way, you're suicidal, hopeless and suicidal and mad, and you just say, I'm going to kill as many people as I can. Most of these, that's really what it amounts to. Suicide, homicide, mass shootings. And it is a direct, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but knowing I worked in the FBI, so I know a little bit about murder and everything. And the truth is, this is blowback from our ongoing wars. People look at our leaders, we all are, followers, we know leadership by example. This is part of the worst part of leadership by example. When the United States gets mad, we go kill foreign people. We go bomb them. Oh, we don't like Gaddafi, we gotta bomb Libya. We don't like Saddam, we gotta bomb Iraq. We don't like Syria or Assad or Putin, on and on. The United States leadership is using murder. When they get mad, they don't like it, we're going to change it. We're the leaders of the world, we're going to do this. Well, what do you think I'm mad, I can do the same thing. And it's a little more complicated than that, but frankly, we're indoctrinating little kids from age 5 for our military, and it's all about kill or be killed. And anyways, this is, all right. Yeah, so the mass shootings, the violent rate right now is off the roof. That's partly, by the way, part of the reason why our lifespan's gone down. And a lot of highest suicide rate, death by drugs, a lot of the teenagers, again, hopeless, people are hopeless. This is all because of the situation of our American empire, which is a military empire trying to conquer the world. Fool's errand, by the way, in what the power. Okay, of course, education. I mean, you can just go through the list on the blowback. Our colleges are all connected to military contractors now. They're connected to biowarfare. You know who made the coronavirus? A guy in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, whatever. This isn't a conspiracy theory anymore. This is actually the FBI, the FBI and the Department of Energy. It was laboratory made as part of a bioweapon. So I'll get to this rationale. The rationale of the United States working with the most dangerous anthrax and of course viruses engineered to make them gain a function, to make them more lethal, to make them more catchy. You know, why would we do that? Why would they be doing this? These are our own doctors, the DARPA, etc. Well, the rationale is we got to develop a really bad pathogen so that we can develop a vaccine against it. And this is part, well, that's the rationale. I know it doesn't sound rational. First of all, how many possible pathogens can there be? The sky is the limit if you work on this. There's no way that you could do this and then develop all of the vaccine, so-called vaccines ahead of time. But that's the rationale. And anthrax, by the way, was aerosolized out of, probably, by all indications, even the FBI, out of Fort Detrick. Aerosolized anthrax before the SARS coronavirus. So so again, backfiring on us. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a thing. You know, I taught law in the FBI. People will think that's an oxymoron. that I did this. I taught constitutional law. And it wasn't at the time in the lull between the Vietnam War and 9/11. The FBI actually was mandated to give training to agents on the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, right not to incriminate yourself, or right against search and seizure. So here's the thing. Cicero said, in times of war, the law goes silent. So in all times of war, especially a war of aggression, where you have something like an Aryan supremacy, or a country that believes that they need to control the rest of the world to be safe. I'm looking at you, Bill. Okay, we think we need to control the entire world to be safe. I mean, it's ridiculous, but people are so susceptible to fear that a lot of people fall for it. And so, in times of war, the law becomes an impediment and an obstacle. So we saw all of this begin to happen right after 9/11. Now we had to have mass surveillance. All, by the way, illegal. Mass surveillance, illegal. And we had to open up the floodgates. The NSA had to basically grab all your telephone calls and all of your emails, etc., and store them forever in order to be safe. We had to torture We had to torture the captives that we caught in order to, the idea was the ticking, they'll tell us where the next ticking time bomb is. It was ridiculous, but it was never true. And people fell for it, and they authorized torture. So all of these things began after 9/11. And now, 23 years later, we're at the point of, to be honest, thank God we're allowed to meet today. We have the right to assembly. I'm gonna predict that if we live too much longer and we don't have a nuclear catastrophe, this will not even be allowed. We're gonna be like those countries that we always looked down on and laughed at because they had all propaganda in their newspapers. Their authoritarian governments totally controlled the people. And we always thought that was bad, right? Guess what's happening now? After the mainstream media was all co-opted by the government, completely co-opted, and they could not write, Chris Hedges, I wish he was up here, our prior Peacestock guest. He would tell you, all of the good reporters, Chris Hedges is a notable, but Joe Laurie is another one from Consortium News, Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, on and on. They all were, and most recently even Tucker Carlson, all were Phil Donahue during Iraq. Okay, so your good ones were all gone because this was about controlling the narrative. And so then, what did we say? I used to be on a lot of panel discussions with Ray McGovern, and he would say, well, we have the internet, and the internet is free. And you know what? They can't control the internet. Well, you know what? They decided they were going to control the internet. So looks like around 2017, Matt Taibbi, who used to be a mainstream reporter for Rolling Stone, now he's just got his Substack and whatever. He said, they all said, look at about 2017, there were meetings, and they'd gone into this. We will call anybody who disagrees with us, and especially who disagrees with war, by the way. If you disagree with the perpetual war system, you're going to be censored, and you're going to be this misinformation. You're going to label you as misinformation. I don't have anybody on my. My Facebook is rigged. I had probably a lot of you. I had a lot of friends, 10,000 friends, and now when I post something, I get 2 or 3 likes. And it's not just because I'm posting against war, and there's a lot of war hawks out there. It's also because it's rigged. It's absolutely rigged. I get invitations to be a friend on LinkedIn, and when I click it, it says it has no invitations. This is, I'm not a dummy. I know when it's rigged. This is absolutely rigged. I knew this before Matt Taibbi and the Twittergate and Elon Musk. But now it's come out, the government sends a list it was an FBI, by the way, an FBI, but it had CIA, it had all of your organizations, and Homeland Security had a separate one. They send a list, censor these people. Most recently, the list came from Ukraine. Probably some neo-Nazis in Ukraine sent a list to tell the FBI, take out these people. And one of them is Aaron Mate. People probably don't know who Aaron Mate is. A few people do. He was the producer for Democracy Now! I mean, you can't get he's won awards, just like Greenwald, but actually they hate the ones who win awards. Assange has 25 awards, and these are the top journalist awards in the world he's gotten. They makes them hate him more. If you win an award for your journalism, for telling the truth, the establishment hates you even more. And so, anyways, Aaron Mate was on the list. And even Twitter, this was when Twitter was censoring, but and the guy they had to knuckle under. Zuckerberg and Facebook and whatever, they all had to knuckle under and do what the government told them to do. And but even then, Twitter said, that's an American, Aaron Mate's Canadian. That's a Canadian, you know, he's a Canadian journalist. And then they didn't do it. So Twitter didn't censor Aaron Mate. But that's one of the small number. The rest of these ones that were American were censored. So we're on the verge now. Talk about the law being the victim of our perpetual war system. It isn't just civil liberties. I never liked that term, civil liberties, because it's the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is the Constitution. It's not like a luxury civil liberty. When you say civil liberties, it makes it seem like it's optional. This is the law. And frankly, we wouldn't have even have a government if that Bill of Rights had not passed along with the Constitution. The First Amendment, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, they would not have signed on to the United States of America if there had not been a Bill of Rights. It's a lot more than civil liberties. It's all going up in smoke. Now remind me if I don't tell you, there's a positive development on that, so I'm not going to go positive quite yet. But anyway, remind me if I don't tell you the positive thing, the law. Okay, so we are killing millions of people all over the world to what? The nice thing, to bring them democracy. Okay? They have, every politician has that little talking point memorized. Bring democracy. My husband told me this before I came. He said, whatever you do, Coleen, please tell the audience that it's not working. It doesn't work. And for him, that's the number one thing. Can anyone give me an example of where bombing the village to bring them democracy worked? Can anyone give me an example of when bombing to win hearts and minds and to bring democracy worked? Fine, we'll have a debate if somebody can do that, but I can't think of any time. Every one of the countries that we, as Americans, believed we were bringing them democracy has gone into the worst chaos. But by the way, it's not just the actual wars and the bombing, it's also the regime changes. Taking out what we claim is a bad government, and even Gaddafi and Saddam and whatever. You may not like these leaders, but taking out a government leads to chaos, violent chaos, and power fighting, power struggles. Even, I was a French major, and I kind of got this I finally understood this with the French Revolution. So I had to study a lot of French history when I was French. And the French Revolution sounds like a great idea. Topple the king and queen. They were bad. Marie Antoinette and her little, let them eat cake. They were bad. So we toppled the government. You know what it led to? The reign of terror. So taking out a government, even when it might be, you think it's justified, it's a horrible proposition. Lots and lots of people die as a result of regime changes and wars where we take out governments. And so this bringing democracy is nonsense. But worse than that, for the targeted country, look at what's happened in our country with democracy. Here, we claim we're bringing democracy, and look at what's going on. People think we may not even have a next election. The country is so polarized at this point, and we have the election system is so rigged and so fraught with lies that we hardly trust any politician. I kind of had a couple of favorites, even I don't know if they're telling the truth. about any of it, even with somebody I thought was good, because this is the nature of it. It's all dirty tricks. Karl Rove made a big joke. He had all of his elections working for Bush and those. It was all dirty tricks, and they would use these smears. And then Hillary Clinton comes along, and she says the reason I lost is because Russia meddled in the election. And I have nobody raised their hand, but how many people believed it? I actually didn't believe it. I thought it was one of the few that thought this was BS from the start. It was, I'm telling you, all BS. Christopher Steele, Dossier, these people, the FBI, it was all partisan, and they've all gone along with this because you know why? They're in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., this is what's in the air they breathe. The CIA, all of even the second impeachment of Trump was because he wasn't giving the weapons right away to Ukraine. Okay, so he was, whatever. So it's all, this is how it's all, our democracy is totally rigged. And I forgot my notes, and now, darn it.
You're doing okay.
So the last point about democracy being rigged, all of the Republican conservatives who were outraged that Trump should have won. And their thing was about machines, and I'm not sure. They were all kind of weird, and it seems to me that none of those actual things that they came up with about absentee ballots, I'm not sure about any of that, why they were so riled up that Trump should have won. However, there's a valid point that our mainstream media covered up the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, and if that information had come out about the amount of fraud and whatever involved in this with Ukraine, it well could have changed the election. And that's because our media, that actually is valid. Our media is part of the Mickey Mac. This is what Ray McGovern says is military, we used to say the military-industrial complex. And he says, no, it's a lot now. Our empire has taken that little military, the thing Eisenhower worried about, which were the bomb makers and the weapons makers, and they've changed this into the military-industrial, congressional, so they're messing with my phone here. The military-industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex, Mickey Mac. And the media is a huge part of it. Again, if you can brainwash people and, this is what Noam Chomsky complained about years ago, perception management. If you can get into people's heads and use fear, hate, greed, false pride, and blind loyalty, you can basically control at least 70% of all people, maybe up to 80, 90%, and especially with fear going on after 9/11 and war fever. So, all right, I'm going to get to, okay, so Nelson Pallmeyer gave a talk at St. Joan of Arc's, maybe the first year of the Iraq War. I think it was something like that, something like the first year of the Iraq War. And at a critical moment in your talk, you quoted Dick Cheney's Christmas card. And his Christmas card, does anybody remember? Besides Nelson Pallmeyer, anybody remember the Christmas card was a quote from the Bible I'm going to butcher it. Something about God knows when the little sparrow falls. Doesn't he also know when an empire rises? And when you said that, a hush fell out over the whole, hundreds of people in the audience, and people went, oh, there was a gasp. There was a gasp at the time. Because what he sent out for his Christmas card, after he had started the Iraq War, killing millions of people, was that God wanted him to do it. God was on our side. There was a famous, and by the way, St. Joan of Arc used to play that song a lot, God is on our side, the Bob Dylan song. And at the time, back then, I think a lot of people understood this whole thing about American empire. And this is the root problem. But I think if you were to give that talk again, I don't think anyone would gasp. Because pretty much in the United States, most people are on board with this. They're on board with American supremacy and leadership, and we're the only force for good in the world, etc. So how is this all, I'm going to stop here. Let's see, where am I at? What time, do I have a?
We got 12 minutes left.
Oh gosh. Okay, this is going to be the quick part. How is this blowing back on the United States' own power? Because I told you these other things that blow back. But the United States used to rely mostly on soft power. Soft power was seen as, first of all, it's more subtle. Now, it is economic power, so giving loans or throughout the world and then calling in the loans afterwards and saying, pay up now or we own you. So we did it through economic power. We did it through what most people think of as a good thing, diplomacy. Diplomacy, people say diplomacy instead of war. I'm going to tell you something. Diplomacy is also based on some really bad things, mostly bribery and surveillance spying. So we know this as a result of Snowden, that we spy even on our allies. And why do we do that? Just out of fun, out of kicks? We do it to get leverage over our own allies. And if we can get blackmail, if we can find out all of these affairs that lots of leaders are having, but that's just one thing, sexual affairs, a lot of them are involved in outright illegal corruption. We like the foreign leaders who have corruption, or whatever, because then we can own them very easy. So diplomacy is actually not such a good thing. It's based on, most recently, Seymour Hersh says the only reason that Turkey switched around and allowed Sweden into NATO was because Biden bribed him with a $13 billion loan. And poor Turkey just had their earthquake, 100,000 people died, all their buildings are demolished. He's very susceptible, obviously. It didn't take surveillance to know that Erdogan was very susceptible to a big bribe. And then he flipped around and said, okay, Sweden, we don't care, Sweden can come in. So that's how diplomacy works. But as our soft power has taken a hit, one of the reasons it's taken a hit is economic power. Our economic power, when we can't pay a bill. We owe $33 trillion. You know what? So how many people trust for investment, etc.? When we tried to put economic sanctions on Russia, they didn't work. You know, maybe if you watch mainstream news, if you get your news from mainstream media, you think it worked. No, it didn't work. And that's because the United States has lost its economic power. We can't use that soft power. What's left with us after we, oh, by the way, the first thing we lost was our leadership by example. It's the only legitimate thing of the whole group of things called soft power. Moral authority, leadership that people respect. If the world respects your leadership, that's moral authority, and that's legitimate. There's nothing really wrong with that. Well, we lost that a long time ago by torturing and all of these series of whatever. We don't know it in the United States because our news will never tell us. But the rest of the world knows it. If you're under the things that have happened, as Sammy will talk about, the rest of the world knows this. And so we lost our ability to actually lead by example, and economic power, and diplomacy, everything else. We get down to what we're left with. How are we going to control the world when we are hell-bent that this is the only thing that keeps us safe is our leadership and control of the world? Well, the only thing that's left is military might and rule and the law of the jungle. So we don't have a rule-based order. We have law of the jungle right now. The Nuremberg principle went away from the start. Even the human rights organizations never said, the United States can't start a war of aggression because that's what we prosecuted the Nazis for. We prosecuted the Nazis. We thought there's two parts of war, but we thought it was jus ad bellum, that it had to be justified. That if you just started a war of aggression in order to gain control of the country, that was against the complete order. That went away. And now we complain that other countries are violating the Nuremberg principle. Well, who led that example? Who set that precedent that there was no longer a Nuremberg principle? That you can't start a war of aggression? The United States did. And now we're mad that other countries are following it. So the bottom line is when you're left with military power, the last thing they've gone through, somebody went through that whole list of how Biden has just everything he said, every line he said that we would hold in Ukraine. First, we wouldn't send, offensive weapons, and we're down now to cluster bombs. First, and then tanks, and then fire jets, missiles, everything that he said we wouldn't do because afraid that we would start, Obama said this too, but afraid that we would start a nuclear war with a nuclear superpower. They've all gone away. So all of those things have gone away. We're now using cluster bombs, for heaven's sakes, in Ukraine. Okay, tell me what we got left. What is our last reckless, desperate thing that we only have military power and we are hell-bent on control? What's left? Tactical nukes. And we had the public service announcement trying to tell people, a lot of people think you can go into your apartment and shut the windows and you'll be safe from a nuclear bomb. I thought most of us, grew up hiding under a desk and knew that wasn't going to work. But they now are threatening, and it's not just Putin. Putin is taking his example from us because the United States has threatened nukes before him, even before him. They're all on hair trigger alert, and it just takes one little false thing. And so again, I'm going to close with saying, I think that we should be thankful that we're alive today, that even though we got some smoke from climate change, it's getting blue over there. So it's blowing away, the smoke. And so even though we should be happy that we're here today, that we still can speak. I hope they don't take away my pension once somebody sees this online. And if they do, so what? Because the truth is, you've got to speak out. We can't just keep our heads down when we are looking. You talk about a blowback of nuclear catastrophe. And they think the powers that be, like Curtis LeMay, again, like Dr. Strangelove, they believe you can win a nuclear war. Honestly, they believe this. Again, they're so deluded, it's unbelievable. And that's why I think that's the final blowback that we're looking at. And I don't know when it's coming, but we're on a clear trajectory towards a nuclear war. Thank you very much. A question?
Coleen, you were going to mention find something positive? You said you had a positive development that you want to talk
Oh,
about?
the positive. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so the positive development is a judge in New Orleans, just a district judge, said the government, he put an injunction on the government to stop dictating to the social media what can be posted or not. And yeah, and it was on a bunch of agencies and a bunch of figures, and so far now it's being appealed. Biden, you know, you think about it, how can you appeal that? How can you even say in appeal that no, the government is going to censor, you know, we're appealing it. They've got to come up with some creative argument. So that's the good thing, is right now, take this as an opportunity, by the way. Take this as an opportunity, the first one we've had in a long time, to speak out and try to get, you know, as many people to understand that this wars that we thought only were on foreigners is blowing back on us, and that we need to be stopping it. I'm going to leave this for Sammy and Jack. And the reason is, I'm a smart person and I look at all points of view, but right now artificial intelligence is so fraught with confusion as to what it will actually do that I don't think an Einstein could give you an intelligent answer on this. Obviously, if it's all automatic, that the computers are going to decide. What we worried about for a long time with drone bombing, we've always worried that if no human is in there pressing the button for the drone to drop the bombs, that it would just be a computer doing it. And so that's one aspect. But you know what? I don't know that the computers would be, frankly, too much worse than the humans doing it, to be honest. But it's going to be a brave new world. Part of it is there's a lot of talk of depopulation. So you listen to these new world, the new world order people, and it's scary stuff. Part of it is artificial intelligence. And it's all, again, about how to control and how to manage everything in the future. I'm keeping my mind open on things right now, but it's very difficult to do. Okay. Thank you very much.
Wow, a lot of information there. I know some people don't want to hear the real truth, but sometimes we have to face up to those realities.